All right, hello Neogenians, welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today we're talking about the secret to becoming a god as we explore one of the darkest forces called Talmiel on the Tree of Death. Now, this is an incredibly destructive force, and so it's one that people misunderstand all the time. If understood correctly, it can lead you to becoming a god. If understood incorrectly, it can lead you into a false liberation that's actually enslavement. So this is an incredibly important video we're going to be talking about here. This is the top Qliphoth on the Tree of Death. Very important stuff. We're going to get started right away. This is going to be really good. All right, so before we get started, as always, my friends, remember this is way more than a channel. This is a revolution of consciousness. We're here to wake the world the hell up. So hit like and subscribe so we can reach more people. We're spreading like fire. If you want to help out even more, then become a member. You can become a member on YouTube or on Patreon, and you can get access to a lot of great stuff when you do. You get access to a ton of free downloads on alchemy, the Tree of Death, rituals, etc. I'm going to be making a free PDF download for members about this video and everything we talk about here. You also get access to our exclusive members only videos. Today's members only video is called The Truth About Biblically Accurate Angels Will Terrify You. That's going to be a good one. It's going to be a weird one. So yeah, that helps out a lot. I appreciate it. You can also check out my books. The links to my books are in the description of this video. Oh yeah, and also give me a follow on Spotify. We are growing so fast on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. It's crazy. And now we're working our way over to Spotify. We almost have 10,000 followers over there. So it helps reach a whole new range of people over there. So if you haven't already and you have a Spotify account, please go follow me over there. It's completely free to do. And you can find the links to all that stuff in the description of this video. My book, Spotify, all that stuff. All right, but let's get started. We are talking about one of the darkest forces of the Qliphoth on the Tree of Death. As a quick refresher, for those who may not know what the Tree of Death and what the Tree of Life even are, what these patterns are is they represent symbolically the structure of your psyche. So when we're looking at these patterns, we're looking at, in a structured way, a symbolized map of your psyche. And the reason why we do it in terms of like demons and angels, etc., is because your unconscious communicates in symbolism. It doesn't communicate in words like how we understand it. It communicates through the language of symbolism, like when you go to sleep and dream. So when you begin to understand and integrate these symbols, you begin to be able to map out and communicate symbolically with your unconscious mind. That's why we use symbols like angels and demons and planets and things like that. What's the difference between the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death? The Tree of Life represents aspects of higher consciousness and reaching higher and higher states of consciousness, things that you need to, lessons that you need, states that you need to achieve to reach higher and higher levels of consciousness. The Tree of Death represents the aspects of your psyche that represents your shadow self and chaotic and destructive tendencies. So here it's about higher tendencies, creative tendencies, constructive tendencies. Here it's about shadow, chaos, and destruction. So why should we care about this? Well, there's a couple of different reasons, but one way is to think about it this way. Let's say you're trying to reach the highest levels of consciousness. Let's compare that to like riding a bicycle and trying to cross the finish line. You're trying to reach the highest level of consciousness. Let's say that's the finish line. The Tree of Life would be like learning how to ride a bike. The Tree of Death and understanding the Tree of Death is like learning how to avoid a bunch of obstacles in that path, potholes, barriers, or whatever. So you need both. You need the vehicle to move forward, and you need to avoid the things that can impede you. Now, this is a very simplified way of looking at it and overview, but that's the main thing to understand. When we're working with the Tree of Life and the Tree of Death, we are working with the forces within our psyche. And so today, what we're talking about is the highest points on the Tree of Death, called Thaumiel, considered the furthest point away from divinity, and is the first klipot on the tree of death. So you see there's different spheres. On the tree of life, they're called sephirot. On the tree of death, they're called kelipot, or sephirot and klipot, okay? And so each sephirot has a corresponding shadow version of itself on the tree of death, okay? So Talmiel is up here, and it's the very top of the klipot. So Talmiel is the shadow of Keter. Now Keter, or Keter, what Keter means is crown, okay? It means crown, but what it actually signifies is unity. Keter represents unity. So Talmiel is the shadow of Keter, the shadow of the crown, the shadow of unity. So this is where Keter holds everything together. Talmiel tears it apart. The name comes from the Hebrew word ta'om. Ta'om means twin. So Talmiel means twins of God. So do you see the twins are something that is it's not a unified thing, it's a dual thing. Whereas Keter is unity, Talmiel is not about harmony, but polarity, opposition, conflict. It's division at the highest level, okay? So an easy way to understand this, if the key word for Keter is unity, the key word for Talmiel is division. So Talmiel, as the highest kelipot on the tree of death, is the root of all division in existence and all ignorance in existence. Just like from Keter, everything comes from it and unfolds from it. From Talmiel, every aspect of division, death, chaos, rebellion, and ignorance is rooted in it. All right? So what does this even mean? Talmiel is the breaking of divine unity into opposition. It is division, the oneness that becomes divided. And instead of a harmonious whole, we get conflict. Okay? So, Talmiel lies, we have the different pillars here. This is the pillar of chaos, the pillar of rebellion, and the pillar of death. Talmiel is the top of the pillar of rebellion, but also gives rise to what will become the other pillars as well. So chaos and death. So when I say rebellion, I'm not just talking about political rebellion here, but just the very foundation and root of rebellion in general, like metaphysical cosmic rebellion, like rebellion against divinity itself, against unity itself. It is the eternal principle of opposition. Remember, we're dealing here with the top three. We're dealing with the shadow of the supernals, which is the shadow of divinity. So we are at very abstract, high levels of reality here. We're not, dealing with human level aspects or ethical level aspects. We're dealing with like metaphysical, the ground substrate of reality. It is the eternal principle of opposition itself, not like, oh, it divides? Well, what does it divide? It isn't so much that it divides, it is division. You understand the difference? Yes, it does divide, but more than it divides, it is division. More than it opposes, it is the principle of opposition. So what Talmiel does is it denies unity with God. And when I say God, I mean the source, the absolute, the one. Talmiel does not want to be incorporated within the absolute. It wants to cut itself off, divide itself off from the absolute, and become a God in its own right, apart from the absolute. Which, as we're going to see, though, is the ultimate illusion, but is the ultimate trap that a lot of people fall for when they encounter Thaumiel. They believe the lie that they can become a God apart or cut off from the absolute, which is not true. You absolutely can become a God, but within the context of the absolute, because that's ultimately what we are. We will talk about that. So imagine an eternal soul that claims divinity for itself, but claims to do so in a way that is separate and apart from everything else. That's what Talmiel does. And that so-called liberation, it feels very powerful, but it's actually a false liberation. Because in severing itself off from the source, which it can't actually do, but it attempts to do so. And in that attempt, it creates hell. Because ultimately what hell is separation. And heaven is unity. Heaven is unity, hell is division. And so Talmiel attempts to separate itself off. But in doing so, it creates its own hell. Now, I'm not saying that you can't become a god. You can, but you have to, there is a very big trap here. Remember, we're in the abyss. We're across the river of Lethe, the river of forgetting. We're in the realm of illusions and lies. And so we have to understand what's really going on here. Now, there's something that I want to, because Talmiel is basically saying, I am God. But there's something that I want to point out here for those who might be following this playlist of videos. You might remember the clipo called Tigerian or Thagirian. So Thagirian is also about wanting to be God, but it's different. What Thagirian is the ego wanting to be God over the higher self, okay? So Tigerian is the ego wanting to be God over the higher self. What Talmiel is much more devious and further than that. It's claiming your higher self as God, but cut off from the absolute. It's a soul that attempts to enthrone itself in separation, alone, which can lead to extreme existential loneliness. Remember, this is across the river of Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. You've drunk from it and you've forgotten your divine origin. And once you've forgotten, you crown yourself as God because you don't remember that you are already actually divine. And Talmiel is called the highest realm of the Klipa because it's the furthest point of exile, where the soul says, I am the God, I am the crown, and I am alone. So in the in some traditions, it's also said here is where something known as the black diamond is forged. Okay? Now, the black diamond, when you reach this level of Talmiel, you create something known as the black diamond, and that's the power to become an individual god. But there is, of course, a huge trap here. We're in the realm of illusion and forgetfulness. And so what most people do is if they attempt to raise themselves up into an individual god, but apart from and separate from the absolute. Because most of those who enter into the abyss and the tree of death see the light as a trap and something negative, which it isn't. It just has seemed like that because of all the religious propaganda that we have of like Christianity, but it's actually like Christianity is a false light. It's not a real light. So that's why people who sometimes deal with the tree of death see light as being bad, but it's really a false. The light itself is not bad. It's the false light that mainstream religion has created, which is actually a darkness. So like Christianity wouldn't be on the tree of, so traditionally, most people would think, oh, Christianity is on the tree of life. No, Christianity would be on the tree of death. The tree of death is darkness. And Christianity is darkness. Not Christ. Christ is a powerful archetypal symbol of light, but Christianity, that's different. That's something completely different. So, at its core, Talmiel is the force of ultimate division, the soul that attempts to sever itself from unity, and is the highest point of the klipot, at the top of the pillar of rebellion, because it rebels against divinity itself. So let me try and give you, if this sounds a little abstract, let me try and give you an example. Okay, let's look at this for a moment, okay? This is the flower of life, and this is a symbol that I call the garden of life or the garden of light. So the flower of life, let's say it represents your eternal soul, your higher self, your true self, your eternal self. Now, this is not the ego. This is you as an eternal soul. What Targaryen tries to do is the ego that says, I am God over the higher self. What Thaumiel does is go, no, I am the higher self, but I am apart from the absolute. So this is the absolute, the garden of life or the garden of light, where every one of the circles in here is its own flower of life, okay? So every circle is a flower of life, meaning every circle is an individual soul. So what I have done here is plucked one of these out and separated it to show that to you. But in actuality, you can't do that, right? Like you can't pluck one of these out and separate it. These are all intrinsically linked together, okay? But what Talmiel tries to do, it says, no, I'm going to break off and become my own. But you can't do that. That's literally not possible. Now, the other folly here, though, if you'll notice, this is a unity and multiplicity at the same time. It's one that is many. Okay? So individuality still exists here. What a lot of people, so you could kind of look at this too as representing as like right-hand path and left-hand path. The goal of left-hand path is usually to break off from divinity and become an individual god because they don't want to dissolve or be absorbed in the unity of divinity. Whereas those on the tree of life or taking the right-hand path usually want to be absorbed into divinity. But here's the key. Both are wrong. As usual, you need both. You need right-hand path and left-hand path. And that's how I define the difference, okay? There's arguments over like what actually defines left-hand path or right-hand path. That's how I define it. So in this context, that's how right-hand path is unity with divinity. Left-hand path is separation from divinity. But the truth is that they're both wrong, because you don't become dissolved into an undifferentiated oneness, and neither do you break off and become a separate individual. Rather, you exist within a network of individuals. You see the difference? It's not like you as a soul just gets absorbed and melts into this. You are still an individual, but within a relationship, within a relational network. Okay? So this represents the union of right-hand path and left-hand path. It is a unity and multiplicity at the same time. Do you see how you need both? You need unity and division, whereas right usually just looks at unity, and left usually just looks at separation. But you need both. Okay, so let's and by the way, if this is one of those things that seems like a little hard to understand, don't worry. We're dealing with some of the highest levels of consciousness here, at the top of the supernals and their shadows. So it's one of those things where, you know, just kind of let the information wash over you. It's one of those things that you have to kind of have some time to sit with it, and hear everything else in context for it to really make sense. And hey, once again, if you're at this point in the video, congratulations, because you're ahead of the curve. Most people click off because it's like, oh, this is too complicated. What are you talking about? Just teach me a spell to get rich or something. That's not how it works. That's not what it's about. It's about transforming yourself and becoming a powerful force that you can then use to create the life that you want, and that is compatible with the collective, where we are all working to create a better life for ourselves and each other at the same time. You see, it's both, one and many. Okay, so now let's talk about the different levels of Talmiel. So every klipot has 4 levels. Think of a klipot as like a building, and it's a building that has 4 levels. So there's the archon, the archdemon, the demon, and the planetary level. These 4 levels. And each of these levels represents a different way that Talmiel's energy gets expressed. So the top level, the highest level, is the archon, the archonic level. And the archonic level represents the cosmic level. So it's not just about your personal psychology or even humanity as a whole. This is the universal collective unconscious. It is the most universal and all-encompassing and foundational and cosmic expression of what Talmiel represents. So the archon of Talmiel is Yaldabaoth, the demiurge. So if you're familiar with my channel, you know all about Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth's the darkest force in the Gnostic texts. Demiurge means creator. So the demiurge in myth is the creator of the material world, the world of illusion, and enslaves and entraps souls. Now, Yaldabaoth is the God of the Old Testament. So the God of the Old Testament, according to Gnosticism, is an evil being. So do you see how, you know, it's like most like when people usually get into these magical systems and whatnot, they look at this and they go, oh, I'm going to take the left-hand path because, oh, the right-hand path, that's all like Christianity and the God of the Bible and all that bullshit. So I'm going to deny the light and go with the darkness. But in truth, or how I believe is a much so not in truth, because this is subjective symbolism. So you can make this stuff mean anything you want. But what I feel is the most effective way of understanding this is saying, no, Christianity and the God of the Old Testament is the tree of death. And that's what essentially the Gnostics said. The Gnostics were like, no, the God of the Old Testament is an evil being of darkness. True light is above that being. So it's important to work with these dark forces, but it's also important not to get like tricked by the light of Christianity, that makes light look like darkness and darkness look like light. And so you see this a lot in certain communities where they I deny the light because I deny Christianity. Well, no, Christianity is the darkness. Again, this is a personal thing. You can interpret it any way you like. Personally, I think this is a very effective way to interpret it. This is how I interpret it. This is how the Gnostics interpret it. And I think it's a very powerful way to do this, because it's like, we shouldn't be like thinking that, we are the true lights. And that incorporates darkness, because we incorporate our darkness within ourselves. It's not like we just choose one path, and no, we're both. But it's important not to like see the light as evil, because it's not. And the darkness isn't evil either. It can be very evil, but ultimately it's just a force. The reason why darkness can be so destructive is because it's like gasoline. Gasoline can power your car, but it can also kill you and burn your house down and make, you can make, weapons of destruction with it, whatever. So it's just energy. Light is kind of like how energy is structured. The dark aspect is more like the chaotic raw energy that requires structuring. I'm going on such a big tangent. Let's get back to what we're actually talking about. The Archon of Talmiel is Yaldabaoth. Now, in Gnostic text, Yaldabaoth is the God of the Old Testament, and he's literally called the first sinner. And why? Why is he the first sinner? Because he commits the ultimate rebellion against the light. He declares, I am God and there is no other. That's Thaumiel energy. And so the idea here is that in Gnosticism, Yaldabaoth goes, I am God, there is no other. And a voice booms down from the eons of light going, you are wrong, God of the blind. And it says literally, when he did this, or when he said this, he sinned against the entirety. You see? He sinned against the entirety, because he said, I am God and there is no other, thereby attempting to deny the divinity of the absolute and all its associated souls. And so that's why Yaldabaoth is considered the first sinner, and is why it said that he sins against the entirety. So interestingly, we haven't talked about this, but just like there's archons for each of the klipot, for each of the sephirot, there are god names, okay? So remember, Talmiel is the shadow of Keter. Keter, the god name of Keter is Echeia. Echeia is the god name of Keter. What does Echeia mean? It means I am. When Moses asked God his name, he said, Echeia asher Echeia, which means I am that I am. But Yaldabaoth says, I am God and there is no other. So Keter Echeya says, I am. Yaldabaoth goes, I am God, and there is no other. So, and when I say no other in this context, we're talking about the attempt to separate from the absolute and claim independent divinity, which is not possible. You can become divine, yes, not independently divine. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to how to understand that, how to access it. But that's important to understand. So, God says, Echeya asher Echeya, which means I am that I am. And so, and you may be wondering, well, wait a minute, isn't, because the God of the Old Testament said, I am that I am. And so, but wait, isn't that Yahweh? Isn't that supposed to be Yaldabaoth? It gets complicated, way too complicated for this video, because it deals with like deep symbolism. Basically, it's like this. When you're approaching the Bible and the verses in the Bible from a Kabbalistic mindset, the positive qualities of God in the Bible are not associated with the demiurge. They're associated with the Ein Sof or limitless light. So I know that that can be kind of confusing, but just know that it's one of those things where it depends on where you're coming from. Yes, in the Bible, it is Yahweh that says, I am that I am, Echeya asher Echeya, but you would say, from a Kabbalistic point of view, that's not Yahweh saying that. That is the source and the absolute. So in the Bible, you can find sort of like God's light side and God's dark side. That's why you can have a Kabbalistic interpretation of the verse, I create light and I create darkness, I form good and I form evil, or something along those lines. Because ultimately God is both. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. If you guys, if that's a little unclear and you want a whole video on that or something like that, let me know. But that's the idea here, is that the positive aspect is I am that I am, Echeya, and I am God and there is no other is the dark aspect. You can even kind of see it there, because you could use it. You could see it in both ways. Like you could take the I am and use it and go, I'm going to declare I am God and there is no other. And that's like the shadow version. But the positive version of Echeya, or I am, is that that's everyone's name. That's the difference. Yaldabaoth tried to claim the name for himself and only him. But I am is for everyone. And so I am is for everyone. And if you think about it, it's really, really cool, because Echeya is the name of God. And what does it mean? I am. So, if you were to go up to someone and say, oh, what's the name of God? Well, what would a Christian say? Oh, Jesus, or Yahweh, Jehovah, Christ. What's the name of God? Christ, Jehovah, Yahweh. But think about this. If Echeya, I am, oh, what's the name of God? I am. Who is God? I am. But this applies to everyone. If I ask you, who is God? You reply, I am. I ask someone else, who is God? They reply, I am. Someone asks me, who is God? I am. So that I am becomes a we are. That's the important turn. The I am, when understood that applies to all of us, becomes a we are. Yaldabaoth tries to use it as exclusively for himself. So that's important to understand in this context. Now, I want to make something clear here, is that some people who work with the tree of death don't deny that other people can be God. They do, but they still attempt to separate themselves from divinity, from the source of light. And that's the important part to remember. Okay? That's sort of the defining key. Is, are you trying to cut yourself off from the absolute or not? And Yaldabaoth cuts himself off from the one and crowns himself as the absolute, which is the essence of Talmiel. Unity fractured into division. And so remember how I said that division is hell? Well, Gnostics describe Yaldabaoth as the ruler of hell, the ruler of chaos itself, which they see as the material world. So they see him as the ruler of chaos, over the realm of chaos. So it's kind of like, sure, you can be God, but you're going to be a god of hell. You're going to be tortured in torment because you've cut yourself off from the divine community. So Yaldabaoth is the great divider. He even separates Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were originally a single divine being, and he forced them into separation, divided them. So Yaldabaoth is constantly taking unity and dividing it in this like divide and conquer strategy. So Yaldabaoth is the root of separation. And here's where it gets even deeper, because Yaldabaoth doesn't just show up as one single figure. He has many masks. So remember, the top three are very important. We're in the realm of the supernals. In the Tree of Death, it's the shadow of the supernals. In the Tree of Life, it's the supernals. And this is sort of the area, this is the level of divinity. You enter into these levels of consciousness, you're at divine consciousness. These are the levels of divine consciousness. And so what's interesting here is that this is the shadow of the supernals. On the Tree of Life, you have Keter, Chokhmah, and Binah. Keter means crown, Chokhmah means wisdom, and Binah means understanding. But Chokhmah is considered like the great father, and Binah the great mother. So you have unity, and then you have the great father and the great mother. And then in Talmiel, we have the archon of Yaldabaoth, but then who splits off and becomes Saklas in Cahagiel, and Nibruel in Sateriel. And so both Saklas and Nibruel are different names for Yaldabaoth, but Saklas is the dark father, and Nibruel is the dark mother. Nibruel drowns the world in foolish ignorance. Saklas drowns the world in foolish ignorance, and Nibruel conceals the light with deception. And then they become a begetting spirit and beget the other archons. All right, so you have sort of like Yaldabaoth and two aspects of Yaldabaoth that then give birth to the lower archons. But even the lower archons are ultimately different faces of the demiurge. So, the demiurge has these many masks. So he even divides himself into these many masks. So let me check out my notes, because there's this quote. Yeah, so this in the Secret Book of John, it even says Yaldabaoth has many faces, so he can convey any face he wants to the seraphim around him. So he can take on any face, and the various archons that are birthed from him come from him, and he can take any face that he wants to. So he's this division into endless faces, endless conflict. Division itself. Okay? But there's also a really cool psychological key hidden here. Even though Yaldabaoth represents like division at the root cosmic level, it also represents shadow at the root cosmic level. And let me explain why. In terms of psychology, because it's a little easier to grasp in terms of like personal psychology. So, according to Gnostic mythos, Sophia, a goddess of light, known as wisdom, she's the one that gives birth to Yaldabaoth. But what does she do? She's a goddess of light from the Aeonic realms, the Pleroma. But what does she do? She hides Yaldabaoth. She conceals him in the shadows. And so Yaldabaoth grows up shut off from the light, not knowing that there's anything beyond him. And because of that, he believes he's the only being in existence and says, I am God and there is no other. Well, think about how much that story parallels how the shadow self works in psychology. That's the story of the shadow self. You have this aspect of yourself that you don't like, so you repress it and ignore it and throw it into the shadow, but it grows stronger in the dark and rules your life from the background. So in the Gnostic mythos, we have this grand cosmic level allegory of the shadow at a cosmic scale. And that's Yaldabaoth, and that's Talmiel at the cosmic level. The root of ignorance, the root of division, the root of death, the root of rebellion, the root of chaos, and the one who divides to rule as ultimately a false god, a god of not of light, but of chaos masquerading as light. Okay, let's go down to the archdemon level. Remember, there's 4 levels. Top level, archon, that represents cosmic level. Then we go to the archdemon level. What is the archdemon level? So the archon level is the Talmiel energy at a cosmic scale, the universal collective unconscious. The archdemon is a level lower at the human collective unconscious. In other words, the energies at the archdemon level is how the psyche across humanity organizes itself according to the energies of Talmiel. So, archon, cosmic level. Archdemon, how these energies begin to form in the psyche across humanity. So, the archdemon of Talmiel is Leviathan and Behemoth, which are incredibly interesting. So what are Leviathan and Behemoth? These are 2 monsters of chaos that are spoken about in many places. It's in the Bible, it's in apocryphal teachings, it's in the Talmud, and it's in the book of Enoch. So let me read you some quotes here from the book of Enoch, which is a vision that Enoch has. Enoch says, on that day were 2 monsters separated, divided. A female monster named Leviathan to dwell in the abysses of the ocean. But the male is named Behemoth, who occupied a waste of wilderness on the east of the garden. So of land. So you have 2 monsters, one female and of the sea, and one male of the land, and they were divided. Why were they divided? Because they were so massive and dangerous that creation itself could not contain them together. So the Talmud says that originally they were made in pairs. There was a male and female Leviathan and a male and female Behemoth, but God killed each one because, quote, lest they breed and the whole world be destroyed. So think about that. These forces were so volatile that the creator had to wipe out half of them just to keep reality from collapsing. And still, even then, one of each is too much and they have to be separated. And you can think of these chaos monsters as creations of Yaldabaoth. And so what do these chaos monsters do? They fight. Yeah, so the Talmud describes God literally staging a cosmic death match between them. And so now we're talking about Yaldabaoth energy. So do you see when you read books like, whether it's the Bible or the Talmud or whatever, if it's talking about God, you have to look at it from a lens of, is this Yaldabaoth dark energy, or is this energy of the source, the light, the one? And so if you got a being that's literally staging death matches like fucking Godzilla and Mothra, clearly we're talking about Yaldabaoth kind of energy here. Okay, so here's a quote from the Talmud. It says, when the Holy One, blessed be he, wishes to show his might to his creations, he brings together Behemoth and Leviathan. They engage in a battle. Behemoth strikes Leviathan with its horns, and Leviathan strikes the Behemoth with its fins until they kill each other. Yeah, so you can see, obviously, we got these battling monsters, and what's God doing? Not showing his power with love or wisdom or beauty, but by forcing his creations to kill each other in chaos. Okay, so that's Yaldabaoth energy, and that's Thaumiel energy at the human collective level, at the how raw division and eternal conflict and opposition takes place across humanity in the psyche of humanity. And this is all division across humanity. So think of the way that we treat each other as like, oh, us versus them, male versus female, straight versus LGBTQ, even right brain versus left brain. Your internal Leviathan and Behemoth. But Leviathan and Behemoth show up in the Bible as well. In the Bible, Behemoth is described as having bones like iron and a tail like a cedar tree. And Leviathan is described as armored in scales with a heart like a stone. And guess what? Breathing fire. Yeah, so in the Bible's version, Leviathan gets that as well. So that's a fucking dragon we got, fucking sea dragon. Bet you didn't know there were sea dragons in your Bible. Yeah. By the way, quick tangent. Behemoth, I was taught when I was growing up, was evidence that humans lived with dinosaurs. I was taught that humans and dinosaurs lived together. And that dinosaurs were on the ark. Like a fucking floating Jurassic Park. So yeah. Anyway, just FYI, there are lots of Christians that think that humans and dinosaurs live together because of verses like this. Anyway, there's unicorns in the Bible too, but we won't get to that today. That's why these books aren't supposed to be taken literally. But if we take a look at the book of Revelation as well, in the book of Revelation, it doesn't name Leviathan and Behemoth by name, but at the end of the world, there is a beast that rises from the sea and another that rises from the land, which is very similar to the Leviathan and Behemoth archetype. And Leviathan and Behemoth are described as battling to the death at the end of time. And Revelation is about the end of the day, end of days. They're supposed to kill each other. Anyway, the idea here is, enough with the myth. The idea is that they live inside of us. So think of it like Behemoth is associated with the male and earth. So think stable, structured, rational, practical. Leviathan is associated with female and water, emotional, intuitive, chaotic, wild. Now remember, we are not using gender in the way that we understand it today in terms of sex and biology, or even the way we define it in terms of gender as culture. So sex and gender are different things, but I don't want to get into all that. Hopefully you guys know that. Sex deals with biology, gender deals with a social construct and cultural ideas surrounding it. But anyway, when we say male and female in these contexts, you could just use like positive and negative. It just means like poles of energy. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that Leviathan and Behemoth represent opposing poles of energy that are at war in the human psyche. And all the division within us, left brain, right brain, reason, intuition, sensing, feeling, and just like in the myths, they're locked in battle. And you felt that, I'm sure you have, if you ever felt that like inner clash between what is like the rational choice and what you want emotionally, that war between you. That's Leviathan and Behemoth fighting inside you. That is Talmiel manifesting in the psyche, the archetype of division itself. So let's talk about the demon level. The demon level is one level down. And what the demon level represents is how the forces become complexes in your mind. Psychologically speaking, archdemons are archetypes. Demons are complexes. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. What it means is this. The archdemon level is the generalized pattern of division that exists across humanity in general. The demon level or complex level is how it manifests in you personally. So everyone in their psyche has the pattern of division. That's the archetypal archdemon level. But how that division shows up for you will be different than how it shows up for another person. That's the level of demon or complexes. The demons of this level are the dividers of God. And it represents how your own experiences and memories form your complexes or demons of division within you out of lived experiences that you've had. And this, it's one of those things that you just have to think about on your own. Maybe you grew up with divorced parents, a home torn up by constant fighting. And love and unity came with division and conflict. That can leave a mark in your psyche, become a complex that says that, oh, you know what? Unity leads to separation. Unity breaks. People will always split. You'll always be torn in two. Or imagine being in a faith that preached unity with God while also telling you that you're inherently sinful, damned, and cut off. That can form a complex of division in you. I belong to God, but I'm separated from him. Hey, my parents are divorced, and I grew up in a fucked up religion like that. So those complexes, but for someone else, it could be something completely different. Just hearing one set of beliefs at home and another set of beliefs outside. So think of this, just like religion versus science. So this could apply to even an atheistic household that goes, oh, like science and spirituality are incompatible. And they put that division. That's not true. True science and true spirituality are compatible. Now, the bullshit empirical scientific materialism we have and the new agey woo-woo, not grounded in reason spirituality we have, yeah, those aren't compatible, but they're misunderstandings. They themselves have become fractured and pit themselves against each other. But true spirituality and true science are very much compatible. You could also think about the division of, like tradition versus progress. Like some people are all about tradition. Some people are like, fuck tradition. We want progress, but it's not. You can have both. You can incorporate tradition in new, healthy ways. You don't have, if you want to give up tradition, you can, that's fine. But they're not incompatible. You can update your traditions into healthy versions. There are a ton of very unhealthy traditions. But you don't want to go so far as to be like, oh, let's get rid of all rituals. Because that's traditional, right? Like, oh, birthday parties are rituals. New Year's Eve is a ritual. Every holiday is a ritual. Marriages are rituals. If you got rid of all of that, life would be really fucking boring. You would strip it of its meaning. It's how we express meaning in symbolic form. It's a beautiful thing. So you can see these false divisions everywhere, and these experiences that you've encountered, things that you've been taught, that wires your psyche around this concept of division. And so this is going to show up in a lot of different ways. And you can see it, I said this before, you can see the tree of death everywhere in our culture today. You can see this energy very much expressed in the division of male and female and cis versus LGBTQ and all that. People that try and enforce strict gender roles. Men are supposed to be strong and tough and dominant, and women are supposed to be submissive and acquiescent and listening to what they're told. And anything outside of that is if you do anything out, you're not really a man, or you're not really a woman if you do something outside of these oppressive definitions. That's a Talmiel energy. That's the Leviathan and Behemoth fighting. So that kind of conditioning is going to cause all kind of splits in the psyche. Masculine versus feminine, logic versus emotion, strength versus vulnerability. But these things are not mutually exclusive. They're supposed to be synthesized together. You don't see them as parts of yourself. You see them as enemies and conflicts. Enemies and conflict. That's the key. So each of these are a certain divider or a personal complex in your mind. Again, we're at the it's going to show up for everyone differently. At the demon level, Thaumiel energy is working in the personal psyche for you specifically. And so here, we're not going to get into too much detail because the demon level is something that is way too complicated. But because it's unique for everyone. And so it's important to just understand, though, that when we're talking about Ta'am, if this sounds kind of abstract, it's because we're at the root, like division itself. Have we talked about like clash between masculine and feminine before on like the lower parts of the tree? Yes, we have. Have we talked about like the clash between intuition and emotion, or reason and intuition, or what? Have we talked about these different things on lower parts of the trees? Yes, we have. But Talmiel is the root of all of it. Division itself. So it's going to express itself in many different ways. Okay, let's get down to the last level, which is the planetary level. So what the planetary level represents is how this shows up in your actions and behavior. Everything else is more about cosmic level or how the psyche is structured. But now it's like, okay, your psyche is structured this way, so how does it result in actions and behavior? Remember, this has nothing to do with the literal planets in the sky. Just like Leviathan and Behemoth aren't actually, kaiju fighting it out. They're internal aspects. The planets as well represent, on a symbolic form, how the energy of Thaumiel becomes action and behavior. We associate them with planets because planets are more associated with the material world. So like what you do. Whereas demons and angels and archons, they're more spiritual, psychic, of the psyche, mental. So not literally planets, but the archetypal symbol that represents action and behavioral patterns. So in Keter, the planet of Keter is Pluto. In Talmiel, we have the shadow form of that, which is Pluto and Charon's void. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. So as you probably know, Pluto is classified as a dwarf planet. And Charon is its moon. But here's the thing. This is actually really cool. Charon is so big compared to Pluto, that it's almost half its size. So because of this, astronomers often describe Charon and Pluto as a double dwarf planet system. Normally, a moon orbits its planet, like the Earth and the moon, and Jupiter and its bunch of moons. The planet's gravity dominates, and the moon encircles it. But Pluto and Charon are very different. Charon is so big that it does not simply orbit Pluto. Instead, both Pluto and Charon orbit a shared point between them. So like this, right? Normally, if you have like the Earth and the moon, right? We have the moon that orbits the Earth. Charon and Pluto orbit a shared space or a void between them. So calling Charon a moon is kind of a misnomer. Charon and Pluto form a binary dwarf planet system where both of them orbit a common center that's the space or void between them. And guess what? This is not common. Pluto and Charon is the only known major binary system in our solar system. And both are always facing each other, showing the same face, never turning away. So they're in this eternal, two powers eternally locked in opposition, encircling a void. You could already probably see where this is very fitting for Talmiel, the twins of God. Okay, so but what does Pluto represent? Pluto is the god of the underworld. He's the Roman version of Hades. In its positive aspects, Pluto represents transformation and power and the underworld and destruction that leads to rebirth and things that are hidden and secret. That's why Pluto is associated with Keter. It's hidden and secret, powerful and transformative. But in Thaumiel, we have the shadow of Pluto, which becomes obsession, domination, control, and annihilation. The dark aspects of Pluto are very dark. So Pluto was discovered fairly recently, around the same time that nuclear energy was being developed and atomic bombs were being developed, and when fascism was on the rise, particularly in Germany. That is the energy of the shadow of Pluto. Very dark. And you can see it's very archonic, very Yaldabaoth coded. But there's very positive aspects of Pluto. Again, like I said, Pluto in its positive aspects are hidden, transformative, and powerful. But the shadow, instead of you get just absolute destruction. Instead of power that liberates, it's power that enslaves. It becomes intensity in a negative sense, betrayal, obsession, manipulation, trauma, abuse. And then think about Charon. What Charon is the ferryman of Hades. His role is to carry souls across the river of Styx, or the river Styx, but only if they've paid for the passage. So Charon is a divider, deciding who gets to cross and who doesn't. So you pair these energies together, Charon always facing Pluto. And so you have that energy deepen. We have that destructive energy of Pluto's shadow locked in this eternal conflict or duality with Charon without any kind of resolution. Just two forces circling a void forever. That's Talmiel at the planetary level. The soul cut off from unity, locked in rebellion, orbiting nothing but emptiness. The false crown, the eternal division. But what it actually represents, right, is that's the symbol. What it represents is how it shows up in your life in terms of actions and behavior. So, how does this actually show up in terms of action and behavior? And before I answer that, I need to get some more water and turn off the air conditioner because it's getting way too cold in here. All right, let's get back to it. Let's get back to it. So we're talking about how this actually shows up. We've got all the symbolism down. Now, how it shows up is, of course, going to be if it's unintegrated or integrated. Because we're going to, all of this is really negative, but we're going to show how to use it in a positive way. But first, how it shows up depends on if it's not integrated or if it is integrated. So first, we're going to talk about if it's unintegrated or not integrated, and it can show up as either repression or possession. So you have it can either show up as repression, possession, or integrated, okay? Repression, suppression, or integrated. Repression means you deny it. Possession means you let it take over your life. Integrated means you deal with it in a healthy way. So, in the repressive aspect, remember that Talmiel is the root of all division and ignorance. And so it's impossible to list every single way it can appear because, like I said, we're at a very kind of abstract level because division can take endless forms. But at its core, all right, when Thaumiel is repressed, the general pattern can look something like this. It can look like serving a god outside yourself. Why? Because Yaldabaoth wants to be God. But you're denying the part of yourself that wants to be God. You say, that's not here, that's not in me. So what do? You hand your power to something outside of you, whether that's some institution, a leader, or religion, or dogma. Instead of claiming a crown for yourself, you bow to someone else wearing a crown. So in other words, when you are repressing Talmiel, you serve Yaldabaoth. You don't want to admit separation, so you cover it with false unity. So you could, this could be going around going, oh, we're all one. We are, but not in the way of just without, see, remember, it's not the right-hand path conception of just being dissolved into a unity with no individuation whatsoever, or the left-hand notion of splitting yourself off and becoming an individualized God apart from the community. And that's not possible either. So if you want to deny any separation or unity, you just go, oh, we're all one. Or God has a plan. But inside, you've denied the fact that that individuation or individuality that is powerful exists. Not even on an egoic scale, but this is higher than that. Targaryen is the egoic scale. So when you repress Talmiel, the idea of standing in your own godhood terrifies you because you've been told it's a sin. So like in Christianity and a lot of religions, it's the ultimate blasphemy to say that you are God. It's like the ultimate blasphemy to say you are God. But according to Gnosticism, the ultimate blasphemy is to say you are God and there is no other. You see the difference? What is truth is, I am God and so are you, and so are we. The I am becomes a we are. But anyway, you've been told that any kind of association with godhood or a divinity is a sin, so you repress it. So instead you follow rules instead of creating yourself and your own meaning. So in repression, you're not integrating Talmiel. You're refusing to look at your own inner power as a god. And so you serve an outer god because you deny your inner one. But I mean, this can show up in New Age spirituality as well, because there's a lot of New Age spiritualists who are like, oh, that we are all one, but that's that false unity. Unity and division go together. That's the thing. Right-hand path, unity, left-hand path, division. We are unity and division. That's what a network is. We are one and many. We are the one and the many at the same time. Indra's net. Okay. So let's talk about possession. Possession is when you don't deny it, but you let it take over your life. And this is where I see a lot of, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of individuals be Talmiel possessed, who get into like magic and esoterica. Usually like when people, that's the thing, right? Like, and that's the danger you have to watch out for. When you are working with Qliphoth and the Tree of Death and the demons, you can be possessed by them. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people who work with the Tree of Death become possessed by it when you need to integrate it. And so possession is when Talmiel takes over and you crown yourself as God, but cut off from divinity. When you go, oh, I'm going to rebel against the light. So this is where you become Yaldabaoth. You become the demiurge. You say, I am God, and there is no other. But not actually there is no other, because there are people who believe, oh, I can become God and you can become God, but still we are cut off from the light. So it's a bit like this. Right-hand path, we are all unified with God. Left-hand path, we can all become individual gods. The synthesized path is that we are all individual gods within a unity. We are united. It's not just about unity. It's not just about individuality. It's both. Unity and individuality together. These are not mutually exclusive. They go, most people do. Most people think, oh, how could unity and division go together? They absolutely go together. In future videos, we'll actually explore the mathematics behind this to show that that is the case. Unity and division go together. If you have unity without division, it's empty. And if you have division without unity, it's just utter chaos. Neither are possible, by the way. You have to have both together. At some certain very, very high levels of ways of interpreting this, at the very end of time, there's a possible caveat to that, but we don't have time to get into that today. But ultimately, there will always be unity, and at the very least, potential for multiplicity. All right? Always. So when you become possessed, instead of seeing yourself as part of a greater whole, you see yourself as cut off from the whole. And this can lead to a lot of very negative situations, because now you're no longer thinking in terms of an interconnected community, but rather just individualized units that have no real coherence. And we don't have time to talk about all the different ways that this can manifest, but you can think of it in many different ways that this can manifest, especially in terms of like dominating others, or even pitting people or groups or against each other. You see everyone as beneath you or as rivals to crush. You might see people as other people as friendly, but it's almost like, oh, they're like allies, right? Like it's not that they're intrinsic, like it's almost like you make a truce. It's not like you're intrinsically connected. It's like, oh, we're disconnected, but we're going to form this alliance. So you become cut off. And so you convince yourself that you're supreme, but you can never be more supreme than the absolute, because the absolute is everything. It's ultimately what we are. We are the absolute. So when you deny the absolute, ironically, you're denying yourself. So those who try and cut themselves off from the light, they're denying themselves because they are the absolute. We are the absolute that has expressed itself in multiplicity. I hope this is making sense. Let me know in the comments if it is. This can lead to some very intense loneliness because you've cut yourself off from divinity. Or rather convinced yourself that you've had. It's impossible to actually do it. You are always connected to divinity, no matter what, but you can bury it in ignorance and lies and illusion. So one has to be very, very careful, okay? Just be very, very careful. That's why I'm not a proponent of like right-hand path or left-hand path. Just be careful. Because they, in my opinion, both have pitfalls. And unfortunately, a lot of left-hand path systems, I fall very much into Talmiel territory, where they're like, oh, cut yourself off from God and crown yourself as God. Which is possession. You become a Yaldabaoth. You become the divider. But you're still orbiting the void. So ultimately, even the idea of like right hand versus left hand, that's divided. That's divided. And remember, I'm defining these in very specific ways. Some people define left hand path and right hand path differently. How I'm defining it is left hand path is individual gods. Right hand path is unity with God. What I'm talking about is individual within a collective, both together. So, how can we use this in a positive way? Let's talk about Talmiel integrated, because we've been talking about him as the ultimate force of division, the soul that attempts to cut itself off from unity. But what does it look like when we integrate Talmiel? Well, it's extremely powerful, because what does Talmiel do? It basically says you can become God. And so that is true. The illusion is that you can become God cut off from the source of light, from the absolute, from the collective. So the aspect of Talmiel that is positive is that you don't dissolve into a bland, undifferentiated oneness. But when you integrate it properly, you don't cut yourself off from it either. Both are illusions. Reality is always a unity. So the power of Talmiel integrated is going, yes, I am an individual, powerful God within the collective network that we all are. So the energy of Talmiel, when properly integrated, allows for massive self-actualization, because it's the force that counteracts the, oh, well, we're just going to dissolve into unity, or oh, I shouldn't think that I'm God. That's ego talking, and I'm beyond that, or whatever. No, you're fucking God. I'm God. We're God. That's what we are. And it's not egoic to say so. It's the truth. Someone who tells you you aren't is trying to trap you. That was the ultimate sin, according to the Gnostics. Yaldabaoth denying the divinity of everything else. He sinned against the entirety. He sinned against all the beings of light, it says, when he said that. So let me read to you this quote to get you a kind of a better understanding of what I mean. So the idea here is that no matter how many aspects of a system you have, they're still in relationship, and their relationship form a single system, okay? So I'm going to read to you this quote from, let me find it here. This is from F.H. Bradley in Appearance and Reality. This is what he wrote. Reality is one. It must be single, because plurality, taken as real, contradicts itself. Plurality implies relations. Through its relations, it unwillingly asserts always a superior unity. Add one world to another, and forthwith both worlds have become relative, each the finite appearance of a higher and single reality. So, what we need to take from this is that we're not trying to erase individuality or multiplicity or even division, but we're trying to embrace it inside the one, inside a unity. See if I have some, let me show you what I mean here. So it's basically like this. If you have, let's say, a single instance of something, and then you bring in a plurality. So a plurality requires multiplicity. So then there's another instance of something. So if you saw something like this, you could be like, oh, there are two separate things. But in reality, these two things form a relationship with each other. And since these two things form a relationship, that relationship itself is the unity. Does that make sense? And no matter how many you add, you're always going to get the relationships that they form together that makes a unity. The relationship itself is the unity. So systems that try and tell you, oh, you can break off, that is not logically possible. If you were to break off, there would be no way for you to interact with anything, because as soon as you can interact with something, you have a relationship with something. And as soon as you have a relationship with something, you're part of the larger construct. So we are both one and many. We are many, but we form relationships that make the unity. Okay? That's so important to understand. This is really key. This is really important to understand. Because right-hand path will just try and tell you, oh, it's just unity. And then left-hand path, in certain interpretations, will try and say, oh, no, we should all become our own individual gods, split off from unity. No, you're always going to have the relationships within it, no matter what. Logically speaking, this will always happen. There's no way around this. So hopefully that makes it clear. And that's the power of Talmiel, for us to forge that individuality, but integrated so we know that we're still part of the overarching network of relationships that is the one, which is ultimately what we are. We are the one expressed as a multiplicity. Okay, let's talk more about integration because there's some really cool symbolism here. Remember Leviathan and Behemoth? Guess what happens to Leviathan and Behemoth when they're killed at the end of time? People eat them. Yeah. So, Second Esdras says, I know I have this quote somewhere. And you have kept them to be eaten by whom you wish and when you wish. And the Talmud even doubles down. And the Holy One, blessed be he, prepares a feast for the righteous from them. And then it goes even into more detail. In the future, the Holy One, blessed he be, he will bring Behemoth and slaughter it, and the righteous will feast upon its flesh. And with regard to Leviathan, in the future, the Holy One, blessed be he will make a banquet for the righteous from its flesh. This is not ancient barbecue recipe here. This is a symbol of integration. You don't defeat your monsters, you consume them. In other words, you integrate them. You digest those opposite forces. Whatever those opposite forces are, whether it's logic and intuition, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, one and many, until they work together instead of ripping you apart. Instead of fighting to the death and being this force of destruction that could destroy the world, you consume them, they become nutrients. Makes the body and blood of Jesus look like a Lunchables meal. So, with Talmiel integrated, you realize both things are true. I'm an individual God, yes, but within a single unified network. I'm not dissolving into sameness, but I'm not cut off from it either. I'm a unique node in an infinite field. And that's where the power of creating that black diamond becomes. Because the black diamond represents you becoming an individual God. But instead of it just being a singular black diamond, you realize that you exist within Indra's net. Indra's net is a network of jewels that all reflect into each other. So it becomes this sea of diamonds. That's why I wear this ring, by the way, which has a field of black diamonds. This idea of being individual, but within a unity. So here's the idea. Have you ever heard that old line? It's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. That's kind of the attitude that's often taken. Like, oh, I'm not going to serve in hell, or I'm not going to serve in heaven. I'm going to rule in hell. Remember, hell is separation. Heaven is unity. Oh, I'm not going to serve in unity, be absorbed. I'm going to rule in separation. But when you integrate Talmiel, you realize that that is a false choice. You don't have to either rule in hell or serve in heaven. See, in Gnosticism, those who attain gnosis and realize what they are, do you know what they're called? They're called the generation without a king. That's the real key. You don't bow to an external God, and you don't isolate yourself as a false God. You realize divinity flows through you as part of the whole. You're sovereign without being cut off. That's what that means. The generation without a king, because no one rules them. Also, think about this. Think about this. If everyone was a king, then there would still be no one to rule them. And that's the idea here, is that we are the generation without a king. We don't serve in heaven, and we don't create a hell of separation, but we recognize the divinity in each other. We recognize the light in each other. The I am becomes the we are. Here's something really cool. So we've been talking about Talmiel. In the book of Enoch, there's actually a watcher with a very similar name, Thaumiel. Subtly different. Not Talmiel, but Thaumiel. So remember, Talmiel comes from Teom in Hebrew, which means twin. But Thaumiel comes from the Hebrew word tamim, which means complete, whole, or perfect. So Thaumiel is the perfection of God, or the wholeness of God, or the completeness of God. Thus, you can say that when Thaumiel fell, the wholeness of God was thrown into division and became that force of Talmiel. But you can become Talmiel redeemed. You can go from the twins of God to the completeness of God. One who helps the absolute become whole and complete. And that's not serving, because it's what you are. It's what we are. So to help the absolute become complete means to help yourself become complete and help each other become complete. So in this sense, perfection, Talmiel, isn't really about flawlessness, but wholeness. A wholeness that includes multiplicity and plurality within it. Multiplicity itself within the one. That's when we can have Talmiel turn into Thaumiel in the sense of wholeness. Complete. That's the important aspect. So when Talmiel is unintegrated, it just rips things apart. You're either repressing your inner God and then serving someone else, or possessed and crowning yourself apart from true divinity. But when Talmiel is integrated, you become a powerful individual, an indestructible soul, a zeta, a black diamond, but within Indra's net, within a sea of many diamonds that we each are together. So also, I told you we don't have enough time to get into all the things of Talmiel because there's just so much, because it's the root of division. But what you also harness in Talmiel integrated is the power of the dialectic. So division and opposition is actually how we make progress. It's the engine of progress, because every conflict creates a resolution, not always a good one, but often it creates a higher version of it. So in the dialectic, you have thesis, antithesis, which are opposites. They clash and then form a synthesis, which is a higher version, but then split off again into another thesis and antithesis, and then clash, and then form something higher. So it's this clash of opposites that goes to higher and higher and higher and higher and higher modes, because you're harnessing the power of that dialectical energy. Now, a lot of people use it incorrectly and in a way that creates suffering, which is what we don't want to do. Some people try to use it as like a way to justify awful, terrible, like atrocities in the world. Like, oh, we're just going to eliminate this group of people because it's the dialectic. No, shut the fuck up. It's not. That's an excuse to use your sick ideology in a way that benefits you at the expense of others. So properly understood, the dialectic can be understood as like a conversation. So imagine that you have a certain point of view and someone else has a certain point of view. And imagine, I know it's hard to do because this is very rare in this world, that both of you legitimately want to listen to each other and hear each other. So what will often happen is if you have two people with opposite views, if they legitimately want to, and again, this is very, very rare, but if they legit want to have a productive conversation, usually they come away from it having learned something. Oh, you know what? They don't agree with each other completely, no. But they usually come to a higher understanding of some kind. They've learned something. I have listened to some people that I loathe and I disagree with very much. But I have learned something in some cases by going, oh, even though I don't agree with this particular thing, this perspective has opened my mind to thinking in different ways. It's not what that person thinks, but if you're truly engaging with a thinker, you'll usually come away from something with, I mean, there's some people who are just idiots who but I'm talking about, people who have some impetus to develop themselves and find truth and come up with ideas. Okay. So anyways, what I mean to say is you can harness this tension to spark transformation. You let one idea challenge another, one force push against its opposite. And in that friction, something higher emerges. That's why video games are fun, because they're challenging. You have to overcome obstacles, etc. So that's how Thaumiel's division stops becoming a curse and it becomes a tool. You recognize, yes, there's conflict, but you can use that as growth and learning opportunities and opportunities of creation. So that being said, my God, I could just go on too. Like, there's so much to talk about in Talmiel, because like I said, it's the root of these things. So there's just so many ways it manifests, because it manifests itself in the entire tree of death. You've probably heard me talk about certain things and be like, oh, wait, didn't we talk about that in this particular clipote? Or didn't we talk about it in this particular? Yeah, because Talmiel contains it all, because it's the root of division. It births the other archons. Anyway, let's talk about how you actually integrate this. Remember, for integration, you should do a ritual and an exercise. Or exercises, a ritual and exercises. Both go hand in hand. Rituals allow you to symbolically communicate with your unconscious that this is important to you. So you have your unconscious working with you and helping you out in the background. And the exercises are because you actually have to put in some work and do some shit. I have provided a ritual that applies to all the clipotes and the Tree of Death for those who are members. You can find that as a download in the members only section on my channel. But I will give you the exercises here, because you can still do the exercises without the rituals. What you should never do is the ritual without the exercises, because that's silly. That's like doing a New Year's resolution oh, I'm doing this ritual, this New Year's resolution that I'm gonna work out every day, but then you don't do it. That's like doing a ritual without the exercise. It's like making a resolution but not actually doing your resolution. The commitment, the ritual is like the commitment. You see? So you want both. But let's talk about some examples for integration. Remember, this is just to get the ball rolling, especially with Talmiel. It is so it's so varied. So these are just some examples, some ideas to get the ball rolling. You kind of have to do this on your own, play detective, think about your life, think about how you can integrate this energy. But here's some examples. So let me get my notes up here. So pick an area in your life where you feel powerless or trapped in someone else's system. Could be religion, could be relationships, could be work, whatever. Then redesign part of it in a way that expresses your will. And then see how your redesign affects others. And adjust it, if you need to, so that your will does not trample theirs, but coexists in the same system. So an example would be like, if you are part of like a religion or a New Age system, or even an occult system, or whatever. If you're part of a system that makes you feel trapped in some way, redesign part of it or all of it. Play with it in a way that reflects what you want as an individual, but then consider, wait, how would that affect others? And then rework it and redesign it so that it works in such a way so that it's not just beneficial to you, but that it ideally benefits others as well, but at least doesn't impede others. This is just a good exercise to get you to thinking in terms of individual will. Will is a little different than wants, but just to keep things concise. This is a good exercise for getting to think of what you want individually, but also how it affects others, keeping in mind, oh, I'm part of a collective. Think about reality as a network. Look at your friends. Look at your relationships, work, even strangers in public. And notice, just reflect, how every interaction is part of one system. They're all everything's part of one system. Look at the earth as a whole. You know, you could take it at different levels. Look at a relationship, two people. Pull back, look at a family. Pull back, look at a nation. Pull back, look at the earth. Pull back, look at the universe. Everything is an interconnected, unified system. And get used to having that perspective of individuals within a united system. And then think about, or write, if you would like, how your individuality shapes the network. And you can even go so far as to think of, you can think of it practically, like literally, oh, in my day-to-day actions, how? Or think about some idealized action you could take. Think about how it would affect your relationship, how it would affect your family, how would it affect a nation, how would it affect the world, how would it affect the universe? You know, let's say, let's say the action is you became president. And I wish that you would, because it would be much better than our current situation. So please do. But let's say that, you use that as an example. You don't have to use something as extreme as that. You could use something that you actually do. But to go to an extreme, like think about, okay, wow, how would that affect my relationship? That's going to really affect your relationship. You're going to have all these stresses, all these pressures. How's it going to affect your family life? How would your actions affect the nation? How would your actions within that nation affect the world? And how could that affect the trajectory of the universe? Now that's getting very high level. So if that seems tricky, that's okay. But I want to get people, I want to even just bring it up to get people to like break out of this small, little, simplistic, singular, human, insignificant mindset and realize, no, this is, because I say like, oh, we're here to transform humanity, transform the world. That's step one. We're here to transform the universe and reality. So like me, for example, when I think, I write my books on philosophy and whatnot, and I have a book on teleocracy was about like what an ideal new world would look like. But when I'm thinking about these things, I'm not just thinking about the world and Earth. I'm thinking about a cosmic scale, universal scale, entities that exist beyond. In my book Cosmogenesis, I go into this. I lay out a whole trajectory and timeline from the beginning of time to the end of time. And so you kind of, I know you want to eventually have that mindset when you're realizing I am a ripple that goes out and affects literally everything. Anyway, let's continue. I'm going on so many tangents today. This is just a very important one. And I feel like it's an easily misunderstood one. So I hope I'm making it clear. Drop some comments. Let me know if that's so, if you need some clarification. Here's a shared crown exercise. This is a really fun one. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself with a crown of light on your head. But now imagine countless others with their own crowns of light, all shining at once. And notice how your crown doesn't dim theirs, and theirs don't diminish yours. Together, you become a constellation of lights, of stars. And think about what that feels like. To become a king among kings in a shared kingdom. You don't have to use king, you can use queen or monarch or sovereign, or if you don't even like the king, just a god or whatever. Just use whatever powerful entity that resonates with you, powerful being. Because that's the thing, like think about it. If you were God alone, oh man, would that be boring and soul sucking and depressing. Think about it. If everyone was beneath you, that'd be awful. It's horrible. Ideally, what a world should be is fully, or at least highly expressed individuals who it's like, oh, I've worked on myself to create myself and learn these certain things. And then other people have worked on themselves and become this powerhouse, and you're interacting with them, and you're learning. Everyone has something amazing to learn from. Everyone has something amazing to share. This idea of like, oh, if I'm a god among many gods, like won't that? But I want to be the most powerful one. But everyone is powerful in their own way. Do you see? That's the point. We're not all drones. We're not all worker ants. We are all various nodes and aspects and expressions in our own way. Another one, exercise, is harnessing the dialectic. When a conflict shows up, either externally or internally, think about what higher truth could emerge from this clash. So if two people are arguing about freedom versus safety, the dialectic is finding a new form of community where both can exist together. That's just one example. But practice seeing every tension as a seed of transformation instead of a dead end. start to see where clashes can become fuels for change. We have to be very, very careful here because, like I said, a lot of people have used this as a way to justify horrible things. That is not what I'm talking about. I am talking about understanding, let's say, even a clash within yourself between reason and emotion. Rationally, I know X should be done. Emotionally, oh, I know that that might hurt this person over here. So instead of being like one or the other, is there a way to reconcile this, synthesize this? Perhaps it would involve doing X, but having a conversation with the person and letting them know exactly why it's important that you do this and why you need to do this and you're not doing it to hurt that. Whatever. I don't know. But you get the idea, understanding that. So these have been some exercises as examples of integrative techniques that one can do. Again, just to get the ball rolling, this is something that's going to be unique to everyone. You should think about it for yourself. But that is Talmiel, the source of division and the highest klipot on the tree of death. But we still have one more to explore, and that is Satan, which is the 11th, and an extremely important one as well. Right over the river of Levi, the river of forgetfulness. All right, so next week we will be talking about Satan, and that's going to be a very important one as well. Arguably more important to understand than Talmiel. Well, I mean, they're all important, but you'll see what I mean when we get to it. It's a very interesting one. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that, my friends. As always, hey, leave a comment, let me know what you thought, and remember, this is way more than a channel. It's a fucking revolution of consciousness. So help us spread this like fire. Help us wake the world up. Hit like and subscribe. Share this. That really helps. If you want to help out even more, become a member. You get access to a lot of great stuff like free downloads on the Tree of Death and alchemy and rituals that I've put together, like the one I mentioned earlier. I'm going to be making a summary PDF for everything we talked about in this video, available free for members. You can also get access to our members-only videos. There's tons of them. We're having one right after this called The Truth About Biblically Accurate Angels. That's going to be a really interesting one. So stick around for that if you're a member. And then check out my books. And follow me on Spotify. Like I said, Spotify, we're growing fast over there. So help us out. Go to Spotify. Give my channel a follow over there. And the links for all those things, my books and the Spotify, are in the description of this channel. So thank you all so much. Big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, Dallas, Nusalina, Chris Magistus, Eric, they call me Trinity, Solange, Kilan, Zombie Ninja, Seaweed, Happy Ninja Chick, Sandy, and everyone else. Thank you very much.